Richard Matheson might not be a household name, but he's undoubtedly one of the most important science fiction and horror writers of the 20th century. He had influence across film and television especially, with over 20 adaptations of his work on the big screen and even more on TV. Richard Matheson was also considered a real master of twists when it came to sci-fi and horror, and he used that as one of the main voices in the Twilight Zone. He wrote about 16 episodes of that series and continued on to the film as well. He's really considered, along with Rod Serling, one of the main people behind the Twilight Zone, which inspired so many artists. What makes Matheson's work stand out compared to other sci-fi authors at the time is he's very concerned with a certain level of realism. He's all about the ordinary person on the ordinary day being thrust into a strange situation. One of the first big hits in Hollywood adapting a Richard Matheson story is The Incredible Shrinking Man. Matheson said he was inspired by a silly Aldo Ray comedy which involved a man putting on a much too big hat that sunk over his whole head. And that made him think, well, what if you were a man who just kept shrinking? Once again, The Incredible Shrinking Man is about just a regular guy. It's a man who accidentally gets sprayed with a pesticide and then hit with a little radiation, and it makes him shrink. There's not a lot of action in this movie. Quite a bit of this movie is about the man's emotional state. At first he struggles to maintain his dignity, then he kind of struggles to find meaning in his life, and eventually he is struggling to survive. After all this, he kind of hits a transcendental moment that's very unusual for sci-fi at the time.
Maybe the best way to begin is to start thinking about the future.
A future? In a world of giants?
I've lived with them all my life. Oh, Scott, for people like you and me, the world can be a wonderful place. The sky's as blue as it is for the giants. The friends are as warm.
A great example of how much Richard Matheson wrote and was inspired by comes in the form of Duel. Duel was inspired by the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Matheson was out golfing, and when they found out the news, they were just so despondent they decided to drive home. But on the drive home, somebody was tailgating them dangerously close and almost ran them off the road. Matheson said even within the car when he was terrified, he started writing down his idea for Duel. At the time Richard Matheson wrote Duel, he was actually a famous enough TV writer. He wrote it as a pitch for an episodic show. But nobody wanted it. They said there was not enough of a story there. So instead, Matheson turned to what he knew, short story writing, and he sold it to Playboy. In Playboy, it was seen by Steven Spielberg, and Spielberg immediately realized that this is a very visual story, and he was excited to adapt it, and as a huge Twilight Zone fan, was even more excited to bring on Richard Matheson as the screenwriter. While writing the script for Duel, Richard Matheson decided to dictate it as he drove back and forth from his home to Ventura, California. He wanted to see how the road looked and see what was actually on the roadsides. So it ends up being a film that really plays out realistically as the drive.
Okay. You want to play games?
A more modern film people may not know is adapted from a Richard Matheson story is David Koepp's Stir of Echoes. Stir of Echoes tells the story of a regular blue-collar worker who suddenly has his mind opened up by hypnosis to suddenly see ghosts and have psychic connections with people. In writing Stir of Echoes, Richard Matheson was very interested in what it feels like to be hypnotized. And I think David Koepp does a wonderful job with this. He has this sequence where Kevin Bacon is imagining a movie theater and imagining that changing the way he's thinking. That sequence recurs and becomes more and more terrifying. And I think it's exactly what Matheson would have waned.
That was the weirdest goddamn thing I've seen in my life.
Congratulations, Tom. You're one of the lucky 8%.
Still have tears on your cheeks.
What the hell did she do to me?
So if you're a big fan of horror and science fiction, if you love movies like What Dreams May Come, I Am Legend, you're gonna have to check out the work of Richard Matheson, who really started it all.